Hey, greetings, everybody. This is David Cook. Welcome to another episode of Stop Telling and Start Listening. And joining me today, this is her official third visit on the Stop Telling, Start Listening podcast. That just goes to show how wise and exceptional she is. And I love having her on because she's got such great perspectives. But my guest today is Kate Turner. And for those who don't know Kate or don't remember Kate, I'll give you a little refresher. I'm not looking at her bio, so I'm going to wing this a little bit. But my impression of Kate is that she works with high performing professionals. Individuals are really trying to expect and demand a lot of themselves, and she helps them find balance and peace and gives themselves permission to do things that sometimes they don't think they have the time or the ability to do. How did I do?
Very well. Couldn't have said it better myself.
All right. Well, Kate, thanks for joining me again. It's always a treat to have you on, and I have a conversation with you.
Thanks, Dave. I'm excited to be here today.
So, this podcast is airing on January 2, and the reason that we are talking about things on January 2 is Kate and I cheated a little bit, had a little pre-conversation, but I think we're both of the same ilk that there are things that we need to do as professionals, as individuals, that we kind of look at, where we are, where we've been, and where we're going. Saying that, there's nothing magical in my mind about January 1 that we can't do, as Kate said, tomorrow. We don't need to wait. We don't need to plan. But, there's a lot of people who look at January 1 as something magical to make new commitments and new efforts and all that stuff. Gyms are full. The bakery shops are overstocked with stuff that people aren't eating magically all of a sudden and all that other stuff. But I thought we'd have a great conversation. I thought we'd engage Kate in a conversation. Let's really talk, though, about how we look at where we've been and what we celebrate, and then look ahead to how do we as professionals or individuals, however you want to tag yourself, looking forward into the future and how we plan and organize and take the right steps. So, Kate, I'm going to kind of open it up to you and say, I know you're a pretty thorough, thoughtful person. How do you play the game?
Well, as you alluded to a little bit, I am not one for New Year's resolutions. I believe if there's something that you want to change, the best time to change it is right now. But I do think that with the turn of a new year does come that opportunity to have a reset and to do a little bit of a postmortem on what has worked and what you want in the future, and whether that's January 1st or whether it's any other day that you're listening to this, the best time is right now to look back and celebrate, to review what you really want more of, and to start taking those actions.
That's pretty cool. That's true. It's I think we've in my conversations with people when we talk about addictions, the reason a lot of times people who deal with substance abuse issues, and we other ways too, but when they deal with substance abuse issues, acknowledging the addiction is something that they're very unwilling to do, because once you say, I have a problem, then the next question is, okay, now that you're aware of this, what are you going to do about it?
Absolutely.
And so it's easier just to say, well, it's really not that bad, or it's really not what you think it is, because then what that does is that gives you the power or the ability to push it off a little bit until it really is a problem, So do in your conversations or in some of the things that you found yourself? I could tell you I found myself doing it, but I'm kind of curious, since you're the guest, I'm going to let you go first. When you're dealing with people, or you're even like taking inventory yourself, do you find yourself in that situation where there's a little bit of hesitation?
A little bit of denial sometimes. Yeah, I do. I find that there's always this feeling of, well, that's maybe in the past, maybe it'll change on its own. Or, well, why should I do that today? It would be better next week or next month or once this quarter ends, once this deal is closed. And in reality, we can just continue to put these things off or pretend that it doesn't exist, but that doesn't actually change the fact that we're being impacted by all kinds of things every single day.
Yeah, but I don't have time to think about it because I'm so busy.
Hmm. Yeah, and you have a good point there. That's what a lot of people will say. But in my situation in particular, when somebody comes to me as a coach, that they've already taken that first step to acknowledge that they want something different. They wouldn't
Mm.
have paid the money and showed up to an appointment if not. And I've actually seen that a lot with, I do kind of a free first call, and there's a handful of people that have shown up to that call really ready to make a decision. And it's amazing how quickly they can do that. And they'll be surprised themselves. But the reality is, I'm not surprised at all because they took that action and
Mm.
took that first step. And that's usually the hardest. Having the awareness, then taking whatever that first step is to start to build that momentum. And so if you can just get up the gumption to do that, whatever that first step may be, as small as it may be, that's probably the most meaningful part of the whole process.
That makes a lot of sense. So the people that you don't know that are struggling, the people that haven't called you yet.
Yeah.
All the people are kind of like wait and see, the delay, the denial, all that other stuff that, yeah, you don't deal with that because they haven't called you yet. Once they kind of lean into, oh, maybe I should talk to somebody, that means that they've stepped into the potential that things need to change or something needs to happen.
Yes.
Got it. Yeah, that's pretty cool. So what keeps people on the sideline besides they're too busy
Hmm.
or denial, however you would classify denial?
Yeah. Well, there's all kinds of different reasons. I think the two big ones that you've listed are really the root of just about everything else. We can dress it up in a variety of different ways and make other excuses, but um, denial is really a large one, and just avoidance is really the second one that I see. And then maybe the only other third that I might add is people thinking that it's going to be harder than it is, like it's not possible, or it's just going to be so difficult that they might as well not try.
Yeah. Well, the latter, when as you brought up the latter, I was thinking that before you brought it up, but, again, I'm going to, go back to people with substance abuse issues, and I don't mean to pick on them, but I find for me that that's a tangible experience for me of people who are, put in quote, stuck in where they are. And one of the challenges with somebody who's dealing with addiction and finds them still stuck where they are is the belief that things could actually be better.
Hmm.
And so they kind of and again, this is a gross generalization, but it's a pattern. They believe that they're more willing to stick with the devil they know than to explore something that they don't believe possible or don't know that they can actually get there, whether it's with help or on their own.
What do you
And
think that stems from?
well, that's a great question. I mean, you're going to make me back up and tell a little story, but I read a book, and this was a very powerful book. A pastor gave it to me at a church that I spoke at, probably, gosh, like 12 years ago. There was a book called Positive Addiction. And, the one thing about my memory, Kate, is I can remember books that I've read or authors, but I can't remember both. So this for the audience and you're going to get the book, not the author this time. Positive Addiction. And what the psychiatrist wrote in his study was he said that people who are adversely addicted, people who are stuck, have at some point in their life have declared, it's never going to get, this is as good as it gets. It's not ever going to be any better. They basically make that declarative statement, whether it's psychologically or they say it out loud, and as a result, they basically live their life out to that truth. It
Hmm.
starts out with like a deep sense of depression. It's like, oh, my life is never going to get any better, and they kind of settle into that, and then they start to do some things that their behaviors make sure that it stays that way. So they force themselves to stay stuck. They get great opportunities, they self-sabotage, they get the dream job, and somehow it goes wrong. And then later on, over time, he said that they find themselves in what he used the term psychosis, but it wasn't like they go, wacky nut and put them in a straitjacket. But the psychosis is they start creating ailments for which there are no medical attributes. headaches,
Hmm.
backaches, insomnia, things that prevent them from functioning in society because it's, God forbid, my story could be different. So their mind actually takes over.
Hmm.
And so, back to your, the long-winded answer, but that's what happens is that it's a belief system. Can I embrace the possibility that my life could be different? And if I can't, what does that mean?
Big questions, not
Right?
easy to answer questions.
Yeah. But how many times, I don't know about you, but how many conversations have you had with people? And fortunately for you, you're working with high performing, driven people. So a lot of these, a lot of people you work with know how to be successful. So when you talk to them about things, they see, well, yeah, and then there's this word that comes after it. Well, yeah, but, and then that becomes the declarative statement. That's when they reveal to you the thing that's standing in the way, that's interrupting their belief that they can. I mean, I'm putting words in your experience, but I don't know how you want to comment to that.
Well, that resonates a lot. And while I don't typically work with people who are actively in addiction, I do work with a lot of people who have sort of an addiction or a dependency to other things than substances. And I would agree that a lot of it does come down to a kind of faulty belief system that either, everything that's worthwhile to have is really hard,
Mhm.
or all growth is painful, or I will never be successful until. And all of those kinds of things are really a way to avoid feeling kind of the full richness of life, or to feel that the best possible outcome is available to them. And so it does end up being this thing that we overwork for, or we avoid a specific action or emotion around by doing something different. And it is really interesting because it's very similar to substance abuse,
Mhm.
except that when you get a promotion because of it, then you have some positive reinforcement around it, or people are rewarded for being a hard worker, or for being critical and hard on themselves and expecting only the best. And one book that I've read that I really enjoyed that sounds very similar to the one that you're talking about is The Big Leap by Gay
Mm.
Hendricks. And it's talking about that we have this threshold of kind of tolerance that we have in our lives that's generated from what we experienced in childhood. And we like to stay in that zone. So if we get up into anything that's either too positive or too negative, we bring ourselves back into that kind of safety zone. So similar to the self-sabotage that you're talking about there.
Yeah.
And until we can start to increase that threshold, we will continue to take those adverse actions or to stay in these kind of maladaptive behaviors. And that's a lot of the work that I do, is looking at, okay, well, what are the things that we want that are out of that zone of tolerance, and how do we build up that threshold slowly over time in smaller chunks, so that when you do get closer to achieving it, you can actually accept it and appreciate it.
And be at peace with it.
Yeah.
All right. But and so the name, like I said, the name of the book is Positive Addiction. Back to your big leap is like, a minute you said that, I haven't read the book, but if I remember correctly, it's a goldfish jumping out of the goldfish bowl on the
It
cover.
is.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. It's interesting how that comes back. But the other half of that book of Positive Addiction and talks about people who are positively addicted are people who, instead of saying, remember, this is as good as it gets, is the people who are adversely not and negatively addicted. The people who are positively addicted says there has to be an answer.
Mm.
And so their quest is they're driven to always find a way, always find a way. And they get attached to um, things, habits, behaviors that can be extremely destructive emotionally, physically, relationally, because they're so committed to habits, patterns, and behaviors in life to find the answer. His example are, as he used people with addictions as negatively addicted, the people who are positively addicted were, runners, obsessive runners. they run on broken legs, broken feet with, injuries because they feel like they have to run every day or they won't be able to do the things that they need to do, or they have to work 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours every day, or otherwise they won't be successful. And I think, I heard you say that is I, kind of get married to these stories and say, yeah, this is what I have to do in order to. And you are finding ways to constructively interrupt some of that conversation.
Which is exactly why it goes back to my philosophy of making changes in the moment as opposed to waiting, because you have to start breaking that cycle and start looking at that right away instead of waiting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's I think, well, you're talking, and what you're talking about is, in very simplistic forms, me simplifying it is you're encouraging people to what we would call pattern interrupt.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just interrupt the pattern right now. The story you're telling yourself, the behaviors that you're embracing, whatever it is, let's just interrupt it right now because you're locked in. Let's get you unlocked, right?
And interrupting it in small ways.
Yeah.
So many of my clients come to me wanting to make the big change, to rip the band-aid off, to quit the job tomorrow, or to find the love of their life this month, or lose 25 pounds by the end of the year, and we're talking today kind of thing. When in reality, the easiest thing that you can do is to find the absolute easiest thing that you can do. So in your example, if you're a runner, okay, don't stop running. Maybe just run 5 minutes less today and then 5 minutes less tomorrow.
Yeah.
And over time, that is the pattern interrupt, giving yourself the freedom to do that and to wean off slowly. Or to change over time, as opposed to shocking your system with something that isn't sustainable.
Yeah. And we've talked about this many times on the podcast. Sorry, people, but when I think of the 100-day challenge that I did many, many, many years ago, rode my bike for an hour a day for 100 days in a row. Notice the one thing that I put in there was achievement oriented, was the hour a day. I had to ride my bike an hour a day. In hindsight, if I had been, now that I'm wiser, I don't know. I'm also older and more broken, but if I had just said, get on my bike every day for 100 days, that would have been enough. But I had to create a hurdle to make it something super special when it was already significant. And 100 days in a row is a lot.
It is.
But it wasn't enough. I had to create a supercharged thing to it, supersize it. But regardless, ride my bike for an hour a day for 100 days in a row. And it just began by getting on my bike and riding for an hour, right? Next day, get on my bike, ride for an hour. What does that win? Where does that going to lead? Don't know. Doesn't matter. I know that if I do this every day, things will be different in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And people would say, well, then what? Well, I don't know then what. We'll find out then what when we do, right? But do something now that can get you into the whatever next is down the journey. And so I did. I sat down with a bunch of friends, invited. We got together a couple of times for 100-day celebration parties, and I challenged my friends in the group who came and hung out at happy hour one night. I said, okay, here's the deal. I want each one of you guys to make a commitment to do something that you you need to do to change your life. And I didn't give them enough structure, obviously like looking back again, I'm wiser now, but and some people, I had one friend say, I'm going to learn something new every day. Thought that was really cool. Then I had another friend who hadn't run in years, so I'm going to run 5 miles every day. I'm going, holy shit, dude, this is good. But that was the nature of their personality, right?
Yeah.
Big stuff, big hurdles, big goals. Well, the person who went for the learn something new every day, it lasted. They didn't get to 100 days, unfortunately, but how it manifested itself and the things that it created for them was entirely different than the 5 miles a day person who, after about 4 days, realized that they weren't going to do it, and they, instead of backing off, they just quit because I can't
Mm-hmm.
do it. It's like, well, but you could still do something. Yeah, but I can't do that one. So then the whole goal got messed up. And and like I said, I'm looking at these things going, okay, how do I coach these people into backing it up? Because I don't want to say that's too much. But at the same time, how do you feel about it? Well, I don't know if I can do it, and then they say, but Dave, you rode your bike for an hour a day, 100 days in a row. Yeah, stupid goal, great accomplishment, but anyway.
There's some tips that I give to my clients for that specific reason. And one of them is to have a plan for failure. So just thinking about what will you do when you start to notice a backslide, whether that's I miss a day or whether that's I get into this in a week and I realize that it was ridiculous and I don't want to do it anymore. But if you start with the end in mind there and think about some of those pitfalls, the likelihood of you actually hitting that pitfall is still pretty slim. You'll probably get the curveball and get something else. But I think that it teaches you to give yourself a little bit of grace and to figure out how to rebuild trust with yourself. And so that's a really nice thing that a lot of people are like, well, I don't need to plan about failure, right? I will do this. It's like, the reality is we're all going to hit obstacles. So thinking through it a little bit, having a plan can really be important and helps you to not freak out in that moment when you do hit an obstacle. And then one of the other tips that you just really hit on was celebrating. So having already planned celebrations in terms of which milestones you're going to track or what the KPIs are, or simply just having a timeline. That can also be a great thing to be able to look forward to keep up that motivation, and also to include others in what it is that you're working on, because there's a lot of accountability that can come from just simply having when I've reached 2 weeks, we'll meet for coffee, or when I hit 100 miles, let's all ride together kind of thing that really drives us.
Mm-hmm. You brought up something, and probably you brought up so many things, but let's go out to the first thing that jumped out at me was um, when you get there. So when you're working with somebody, you're talking about what there is. Is it a goal? Is it a vision? How do you construct it with your clients?
The reality is I don't construct anything.
I know, I forgot.
Yeah.
Thanks for the
Uh,
reminder.
it's a fun thing about being a coach. None of this is about me. It's about the client and meeting them where they are. So sometimes people come in and they already have a construct. It's X, Y, Z that they want, and they just need to figure out the plan to get there. They already have the vision, they already have the idea. Then it's looking at what are those actions and then pulling it back to what are the feelings and beliefs that are around those that are preventing them from either taking it already or from knowing, what those next steps look like. So I get that quite a bit. A lot of people that come to me already have those ideas and are not expecting to dig into the feelings and the beliefs that are around them. They just want the plan, or they just want the accountability to get it done. But we do have to back up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then for the other set of clients who, let's say, come in just saying, I'm unhappy, I don't know why, or I don't know what I want, then we do have to do some kind of vision setting. And what I've found to be the best course of action oftentimes in that situation is to not address it head on. Most people will say, okay, I want to talk about my life purpose, or I want to talk about my dream career, but I don't know what that is. Instead of saying, okay, well, let's talk about what you want or what you need or what you like, what I'll actually do is have them typically visualize. And instead of visualizing what they've come in with, I like to go to some sort of other visualization, like planning a party, maybe a few years in the future, and letting them choose what that timeline is. And thinking about, okay, your best self, you just have celebrated a promotion, or you're celebrating a big milestone birthday, whatever it is, you can decide. And then thinking about who are the people that are around, what's the atmosphere, starting to imagine things like what are you eating and how does it taste, and is there music, and then thinking about the people that are around you and who is showing up that you really care about and what are they saying, how you're feeling in that moment. If you can start to visualize something that's really positive and does actually feel possible, you can then take what you learn from that visualization and apply it to whatever it is that you're starting to think about. So I did this with a client recently about a party for a promotion. And then they started talking about how important mentorship was. They didn't realize that what made them most excited was at this party was having all these mentees come up and say, thank you for showing me the ropes. And you taught me so much. And so he could then take that and apply it to his job search. Whereas before it was like, do I do job A or do I do job B? And this way we could look at it and say, in job A, will you be able to mentor people? In job B, will you? What was the impact there? Does either one really apply or does something else come up now? And that really kind of opened it up to have then tangible steps to take. But it gave a very different direction than just looking at it from a tactical perspective or spinning around in this feeling of, I don't know, and I'm not sure what's possible.
I love that. Yeah, because that back to our the original premise behind our getting together in the first place is that sometimes when you hear people say, yeah, I'm going to lose 25 pounds next year, and it's like, okay, cool, great goal, not but why? What's really driving that? So well, I hate the way I look. I hate the clothes I'm wearing. I feel like I'd have more confidence if, and so then you can unpack that. And it's really not about losing the weight as much it is how do you find um, comfort, joy, and happiness in being who you are, and what are some of the things that you need to do to be more, in that space. Did I summarize that correctly?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
All right. Lucky guess, but no.
And I'll again go back to challenging you. I sound like a broken record on this show, but even looking at changing that question of why, right?
Yeah.
So, what do
Oh,
you
that's right.
anticipate you're going to look like then, right? What do you want to wear when you lose 25 pounds? How do you think you'll feel when you reach that? Those are those same kinds of topics, but will help turn that kind of positive spin, that possibility onto it, instead of focusing on sort of what the obstacles are or what the criticism of a
Yeah.
person's self might be.
I forgot about the why.
Because why is important, but sometimes asking specifically why can change the slant of the
Yeah.
perspective.
So and for those this is an opportunity for everybody to go back. If you haven't heard Kate before, go to the last time that we talked because Kate was really clear on why is a very important understanding, but asking why isn't necessarily the best way to get to the why. It's creatively asking questions like she just did. Tell me more. What does this create? What opportunities does this create for you? What would you like to be experiencing as a result of? It's the same why, but it's a little bit less confronting, and it almost why almost puts people on the defensive.
It
It's like
can.
why, like, oh, I don't know, and they kind of like pucker up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great coaching. I love that. Now I forgot. I'll send you a couple cookies in the mail, but anyway, this is the thing. I was remembering when because it was very transformational for me. So for those who hear me go back to the bike ride, I apologize, like you said about the broken record thing, but I remember, first of all, for some reason that bike ride, I never thought I wasn't going to get there, and I wish I could explain what was behind that because I really can't. It's just I showed up and said I'm going to do it. When I challenged myself, the reason I challenged myself for 100 days was I really didn't know that I could do it. But for some reason, the minute I started, there was no doubt in my mind I was going to find my way to it. But one of the things that came along is I was probably 45, 50 days into the ride, and I was already anticipating the finish line. I was thinking, oh man, what am I going to do? How am I going to do this? Like, how do I celebrate this? Anticipating the experience of doing it. And I don't know, Kate, if you have wisdom into that, why, some things for us are, even when they're hard, they're easy, or even when, they start out with I don't know, but from the get-go, there's almost like no doubt. What's the, is there a secret to that?
There's no easy answer, and it's likely different for each person. But what comes up for me as you say that is I do know that riding your bike was already something that you were doing. So it wasn't necessarily a change in your total behavior. It was a change in what your focus was on it. And sometimes that just shift alone can make it to seem easier. So instead of I've never run in my life or haven't run in 10 years and now I'm going to be a runner. That's a
Mhm.
change in your identity. Whereas, okay, I love to exercise. I'm an athlete. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to include running as part of that. That's a
Mm,
shift in your focus, to allude back to the friend of yours that didn't end up succeeding in running those 5 miles a day, whereas you did. So I think that's a big thing is if you don't have to fundamentally change your identity or the action that you're taking on a daily basis, you can just change the intention behind it or the focus of it or the intensity of it. That can be easier to sustain because it's something that you're already doing.
mhm,
And then the other piece of it is that you had this idea that it was possible and that you were going to do it, but you weren't attached to a specific outcome. That's another great way to approach almost anything that you do. Um, so that it's more about what you are doing than what will happen once you do it. Because if
mm,
we fixate on the goal of going back to your example, 25 pounds, well, we might feel great at 20. What if we stall out at 20, but we feel the way that we wanted to, we look the way that we wanted to, we've accomplished even more than we ever thought. That thought can still creep in of like, but it wasn't 25 pounds. And then it's assumed failure, even though ultimately you reached everything that you wanted. So while it can be really difficult, especially for my clients that come to me like, I want a new job or I want to feel happy all the time. Well, if we get them to 90%, if we find a job that mostly covers what it is that they want, that might be enough. But if we only focus on what that specific outcome is, then it doesn't feel right. It doesn't sit right in the end.
yeah. It's interesting. I feel like you're speaking to me. It's like I don't like that you're speaking to me so directly. um,
But
Go
I'm
ahead.
speaking to everybody.
I
That's
know it's
that's the
interesting.
thing. That's the thing that we all have in common, I
Yeah.
believe. And I don't know if it's just the humanity in us or whether it's programming that we've all kind of received to be outcome oriented or to be self-critical when we don't hit the nail exactly on the head. But it is something that is common to just about everybody. And once you can understand that about yourself and have the acceptance that that's the way it is, then you know how to play the game to combat it. Or you can work with somebody who is really skilled in that, who can help you to point out what those blind spots are, things to consider so that you have a game plan to make it work.
Hmm, okay.
What's coming up for you?
Oh, well, I didn't put you on the show for free therapy, but we'll use this as an example for anybody who's listening to this. So I have one story that I'm still navigating through it. I would, be honest with you about that, but I've, gotten to a different place where I recognize I will own the fact that it's unhealthy for me. But 2016, I made a commitment that I was going to ride my bike across the country. And the biggest focus of it is I wanted to ride Route 66. So I rode Route 66 from Santa Monica, California to Chicago, covered that 2,500 miles, ended up getting to Detroit. But the plan was to get to New York City. And I got to Detroit and I ran out of money. It was like because I was with my nonprofit. I ran out of money. Some other things got in the way too. It just, and the trip ended. And I would say for about 6 weeks, I was absolutely, totally, completely depressed and shut down that I failed to get to New York City. And then I remember it was Thanksgiving weekend. The bike ride ended, like say the end of September. So that was like almost 2 months. And I remember sitting in my living room at my house, and every day while I was, in my mourning period, if you will, I kept thinking of different parts of the ride that were cool. And it was like, yeah, but, yeah,
Hmm.
but. And then finally I said to my wife, I said, that was a hell of a trip. And I got teary eyed and weepy. And she says, about time you realize that. And I still haven't let go of the fact that I didn't get to New York because it was a dream of mine to ride my bike across the country. But it was just what you talked about. Did I have something to celebrate? Think about it. I rode 60 miles a day for 6 days a week for 7 weeks. That's a hell of an accomplishment.
Hmm. It
I
is.
rode I rode all of Route 66, which people, will kill to be on a motorcycle or car and ride, I did it slowly but surely, methodically across the country. I met people, gave talks, blah, blah. I could give you all the things that were awesome about it. And I always did yeah, but
Yep.
you know and so I don't want you to coach me, but at the same time speak to that, because you're dealing with that a lot with people. Speak to the thing that I set a goal and I didn't get there, but there are things that I know I could or should or probably need to embrace.
What I like to do is not immediately move into the yeah, but side of it. I like to sit around with what it is. It is completely okay to feel like a failure if you didn't reach your goal. It is completely okay to be dissatisfied even after you have reached your goal. I have a lot of clients who come to me in that situation and feel shame because they have accomplished everything, but they don't feel great. And I try not to shy away from what those feelings are, what that reality is, why they feel that way, because it sounds like for you, it took several weeks to be in that place before you could start to have a different perspective. And it's okay to sit in that place for weeks or months. It feels awful to do it, but the reality is those feelings are valid.
Hmm.
It's staying in that place for years or decades, right? That isn't healthy, where we do need to seek some help or some support to regain that perspective. But going from, I did this on Thursday and on Friday, I better feel great about it, is completely unrealistic. It's like spiritual bypassing, kind of,
Mhm.
to immediately believe that every failure, whether perceived or otherwise, should immediately result in something positive or that you should feel okay about it. It's just not realistic.
Mhm.
And if you don't process through those things, then it's going to show up somewhere else
Right.
too. Then you try to push yourself towards something else that maybe is unhealthy, or that helps you to numb out from how you're feeling. And so, feeling those feelings, acknowledging them, naming them, processing them, allowing them to just be for a while is actually very healthy.
It's kind of like I think it's like that. One of my takeaways for kind of like the Buddhist thought, right, is like, experience what you're experiencing, because eventually you will move through it, and it's okay,
Mhm.
because to experience it is learning in and of itself. You experience that feeling, that emotion, those thoughts. Experiencing is the lesson.
Mhm. It really is.
Yeah, as opposed to saying I shouldn't be feeling that way, or or hey, get over it.
Mhm.
Because that's denying the experience and the lesson of those feelings.
Absolutely.
I love it. You're so wise. When I grow up, I want to be like you. Um, so back to this thing is like, how often how do we go through this thing of looking in the rearview mirror? We look back and we say this year sucked, or this year wasn't what I wanted to be. Um, is there a constructive exercise in kind of taking inventory? I mean, what do you do personally or professionally in the sense of, kind of, because we all do look in the rearview mirror and look at our journey. If we spend too much time looking in the rearview mirror, we're going to crash and burn. But at the same time, there are ways to reflect that are healthy. There are ways to reflect and examine that are unhealthy. How do you parse all that?
Well, there's a number of different things that you can do, and I'd recommend that people think about what feels best to them or what they're drawn towards, because there's no right or wrong questions to ask. One version that's landed for me is to do a little bit of a post-mortem and manifesto set kind of thing, which I think of first and foremost as what are you willing to let go of? So there's a lot of freedom in being able to say no or to say this ends here. So thinking about what are those things that haven't worked or that you don't want anymore, and giving yourself the permission to let those go or to step away. That can be a great first step. And then comes the second piece of thinking about what you're stepping into.
Hmm.
So that's where the visioning comes in. That's where the new behaviors come in. That's where a new belief or a new feeling might start to materialize. And then to put a cap on what was in the past, just thinking about maybe what was the big lesson of the year or the month or the chapter of your life. As we're talking about this, it's probably for the year, but I think there's a lot of freedom in setting what that timeline is. So how far back you want to go and where you want to cap that off. And just thinking about, and that's turning that kind of positive side to it. Okay, what's the lesson here? What can I take away? While I'm also stepping away from that into something that's new.
Mhm. Yeah, so being the experience, the thing that you're letting go isn't something you criticize yourself for having or experience or being or doing. It's more say, okay, it is what it is.
Mhm.
What do I take away from that experience, that lesson, whatever it is, that part of my journey? Because I did learn, finding a positive in something, even though but that was stupid. You're saying, yeah, it was stupid, but what did you learn?
Mhm.
Or that was a mistake. Okay, maybe it was a mistake. Be critical, but let's move past that. What did you get out of it that you can move forward with from a positive point of view, as opposed to shaming and criticizing yourself? Is that what you're saying there?
It is.
Okay. And I was listening to you as you were talking. You are talking about removing things, but what you're also talking about is replacing, bringing other things in. So is this more like subtraction by addition? We're bringing in positive as we move something out. I don't know, because that's kind of what I'm hearing. Is like, I go back to the diet thing because I think diet is so tangible. Maybe it's tangible
It
for
is.
me because I'm always obsessive about it. But if I say I'm not going to eat cookies, or I'm not going to eat cake, or I'm going to drink less caffeine and stuff like that, then I'm focusing on those things as what I'm taking out. And instead of saying, okay, I've decided that I'm going to eat more fruits and vegetables. I'm going to drink more green tea, whatever. What I'm doing is I'm taking those things out, but I'm taking them out by focusing on the things that I'm bringing in. Is that what you're talking about there?
That can be a great behavior for habit change, because you're already going to eat. So you instead make a conscious choice to eat something that does benefit you and your goal, instead of keeps you farther from it or perpetuates the cycle. Pairing activities can be another way. So if, let's say, you want to um, let go of self-criticism, for instance, then you can pair it with something you already do. Like every time I sit down on my computer, I'm going to read an affirmation that's on my screen. So you're automatically going to sit down at your computer probably 10 times a day, and you just see that instantly. So that can be another great thing. So if you're taking something away, then add something in that place that's better for you. Or if you need to have some sort of formed behavior over time, pair it with something that you already do and it's a habit already, so that it just gets automatically added into your life. Both are
Love it.
great options.
Okay. Got it.
And then one thing that does come up is just on that letting go side. I think it's all about space and time. We all operate in sort of the same thought patterns every day. A lot of us have routines that look very similar day in and day out. And so realizing that in order to put something else in, you might have to create some more mental space, or you might have to create more time in your day for something. And so in order to do that, you do need to eliminate something. So letting go of it or eliminating it is the way to free up that space to be able to replace it with something better.
What happens when you're hardwired to some habits? Because I'm just thinking, you're talking to a control freak driven kind of dude. I'm not a stranger to the conversations you had. I'm just thinking there's some things you just get so hardwired to that even when you think about the habits, say, I just don't know, and just clenching up. I'm just thinking of things that just have become part of my routine that I know aren't good, but I'm so it happens automatically.
It sounds like to me you already have an answer formulated in
Yeah,
your
no way am
brain.
I going to formulate the answer in front of you. You're the expert. I'm just the guy probing for insight and ideas.
Yeah, I'm not the expert. I am just simply
Yeah,
somebody who deals with this with other people on almost a daily basis, but it is different for everybody. Why you do something or why you feel some way about it is deeply unique to each person.
yeah, that's true. I love the way you dodge some of my questions, but it's okay. You are wise beyond your years. That's all I'm going to say. But anyway, and back to the answer. I will tell you what's formulated. It is really funny because it goes back to the addiction conversation. We get, I will own. I get in habits. Right. In fact, I was talking this morning with somebody because we were talking about swimming, and I swam in high school and college a lot in high school and college to the point where it's really hard for me to swim now because the minute I get in a pool, the back and forth, a couple back and forths, it's like, oh my God, I hate this. I quit swimming because I hate this. But the
Hmm.
funny thing is that I have a routine for getting in the pool that even though I haven't been in the pool for a couple of years, when I was a 16-year-old kid, so that's 60 years ago or 50 years ago, I had a routine for how I get in the pool. Guess what? I get in the pool today the same stinking way. Take my goggles, I get them wet, I spit in them, I twirl the thing around, and then I put it in the other side of the goggle and twirl it around and put it on, put it right here, jump in the water, put my goggles down and push off. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I am so wired to this little habit that if you said, Dave, why don't you try to do something different? I think my head would explode.
Hmm.
Why don't you flip the goggles out and put them on in the pool? I don't know if I could do that, but even if I did that, I would still go and do the little swirly thing. And there are just some things that are so hardwired that the thought of possibly interrupting it for whatever reason, even for fun, I don't know that I could.
Hmm. But would it even be fun to interrupt that pattern?
I don't know. Well, fun. That's exactly what it would become. And
Mm,
I know that when I've done some of my coaching with my clients, because I tell them, for me, a lot of the things that I do, I call it, for me, it has to be a game. I
mm,
play the game of change. And a lot of people don't like that because they say, well, that doesn't sound genuine. I said, no, you don't understand. It's an intellectual challenge for me. I have to make it a game. Can I play the game by a different set of rules? Can I have this habit? It's a game. Can I figure out a way to do something different? It has to be a game for me because otherwise it becomes this thought thing and it's no fun. But if it's a game, yeah, hey, I'm gonna challenge myself. Okay, let me see if I can do it. Oh, I did it today, And so there's this, like you talked about, the celebration and the victory. So for me to do it, it has to be your idea of fun. For me, it's a game. Game and
yeah.
fun synonymous.
It's a
That's
matter of perspective,
Yep. It's the
and the
only way.
intention behind it, which is beautiful. That's a huge shift in itself. If somebody is trying to change their life or reach a specific goal, and they're not sure how to do it or don't think it's possible, simply approaching it the way that you did, and maybe not even head on, simply approaching something else in a different way to see if that is possible and to see if that works, can be that first step.
Mm-hmm. And it's like, and I had one instructor in my yoga class. She's okay, everybody, let's start in the sitting position, cross your legs and hands on your knees. Okay, now everybody switch their legs.
Mm-hmm.
And then she'd say, do you know why I did that? And people kind of look at her, she said, I did that because we have a habit. This is where we always start. Let's start in a different position. Even though we're in the seated position, but we started in a different position because we changed the way which leg crossed over which first. And I thought, yeah, that's really cute. Or, you've heard the old saying, people challenge say, for the next 2 weeks, I'm going to put my shoes on, left foot first, right foot second, instead of right foot first, left foot second, which is my pattern. But just to see if you can do it. And the part of it is just to see if you can do it is the game piece.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like work. It's kind of, yeah, I wonder if I can. Oh, let me see if I can step into that challenge. But you make it fun. But I think, I don't know, some things like that are fun, but some other things aren't necessarily fun. Some changes aren't fun. When we're talking about relationships or jobs or, those kind of things, some of those are a little bit more structured and risky or more painful, aren't they?
Well, what I see there is a judgment.
Oh,
And it could also go back to some sort of belief, like I talked about before, with believing, meaningful things are hard or whatever is worthwhile is going to be challenging. It doesn't have to be, or you could simply just look at if this idea of fun, looking for what is the fun part about it. There's going to be one little tiny piece somewhere.
yeah.
Yeah, or the challenge is to understand why anything should be fun. That's a
Right.
whole nother conversation, but I think that's a really interesting dialogue to get into with somebody, because life is what we make it, and the actions that we take are part of that, but the beliefs and the values that we hold behind it are also a really big piece of it. And so it's not necessarily about playing with your relationship. Maybe it's playing with your relationship to how you feel about it that makes the difference.
That's interesting. So it goes back to something you talked about very early on. These are incremental things. You start out with
Yeah.
something. You start out with an awareness of doing something, engaging different, thinking different, however it is, on a small level, and allow yourself to experience it, think about it, see it, and see where it takes you from there. Is that
Yes.
okay? Yeah.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing, is not expecting that change overnight and designing things in a way that we continue to have these small successes that we can build on over time, instead of um, lining ourselves up for failure,
Mhm.
either now or in the future.
Like the 5 miles a day, right?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
potentially.
Yeah. Which is, goes back to my whole thing. Like I said, I love the weight thing, is because, people want to lose 25 pounds. So what do? They, go on a super weight loss program and, have eat a protein cookie once a day for, 25 weeks, and they lose 1,000 pounds. And then, a year later, they're 1,000 pounds heavier again. And so what happened? Well, it didn't work. Well, it didn't work because we didn't change anything. We just
Mm-hmm.
interrupted stuff for a little while. And then we went back to whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're saying is, why don't we look at the long plan? The long plan is, let's start here with a goal, an end goal in mind, but know that it's a progression. It's a series of experiences and activities and processes, and let's see where it takes us.
Yeah, and some kind of idea or vision for what that outcome looks like that you can believe is possible. That's very important. The belief that it is possible, but then looking at it just even one day at a time.
Mm-hmm.
So, what can you do today that gets you closer to that? And can you commit to also doing that the next day and the following day? If the answer is yes, great, start there. If the answer is no, okay, no problem. Find what you can commit to, and start today. And then
Mm-hmm.
tomorrow, think about it then and commit to it that day. That's how you build that up over time.
Wow, we're gonna make this about me again really quick. Sorry. The believe it is possible. Okay, so what gets me to show up every day is that I know it is possible.
Hmm.
Okay. But to embrace the belief that it is possible is a struggle because I can point to, like we talked about the Route 66 thing.
Hmm.
Okay. But at the same time, I can talk about the 100 pedals ride. I can point to, I gave up drinking by holding up a beer and said, I'm not going to drink anymore. And I haven't had a drink since 20 plus years later. Okay. So is it possible for me to create incremental shifts? And I have experience and with that? Yes. Manifesting outcomes? Yes. Do I have these huge failures that interrupt my confidence that I can do it again? Yes. So, I really don't want you to coach me, but at the same time, I'm putting it out there. So where do you go with that? Because I would be honest, me today believing it's possible, no, I don't believe it's possible. But at
When
the
you
same,
say it, do you mean a very specific thing that you have in mind?
that's a good question. Yes, I do have a couple things in mind. I have a very specific thing in mind. Yes.
Hmm.
Do I believe that, without getting too specific, because it is in some respects too personal, but do I believe that my life can change in the way I desire it to change? No.
Yeah. So to me, it sounds like you have two choices: change the belief, do what you have to change the belief, or change what you want. And both
Dude,
are in your power.
man, you make it way too hard at the same time,
But
way too
those are
easy.
both things that you can control. Yeah, there's a movie that I love called Dream for an Insomniac. It's very old and not very old. Sorry. Edit that out. It's around as old as I am. And there's a woman in it who says, I either get what I want or I change my mind.
Ah,
And
love that.
yeah, right. And it's very true because that is within our control. We can work towards something doggedly until it happens, or we can at any time say, nope, this is not what I want anymore. And I'm going to do something different, pursue something different, and get it.
Yeah. I had a guy that I worked with 20 something years ago, and in a very small way, it was a short time relationship, about 6 months, but I got a lot of nuggets of wisdom from him. But he was from like Houston, Texas, and I'm not even going to pretend to try to do the accent, but he said to me, he said, Dave, if you don't like something, change your mind.
Hmm.
And I'm like, what kind of shit is that? But you just dropped that same thing on it, right? You could either change it or change how you think about it.
Hmm.
Wow. All right. That's pretty powerful. Thanks for the reminder, Kate.
Anytime.
So okay, so as we look ahead, we're looking into this year. Um, gosh, I'm just trying to think. So what what is it again that we're gonna do? We're gonna just like what are the things that I want to change? Or what are the things I want to let go of? And what am I going to replace them with? That's really what we're
Yeah, if you want to do a postmortem to move forward, first look at what you're willing to let go of
mm,
in service of what you want.
mhm.
That's really the first one there. And
So
then,
so it could be beliefs, it could be
mhm,
habits, could be
yeah,
behaviors, okay, relationships, whatever, things that you're going to give yourself permission to let go of.
yes.
Okay.
And then
Number
getting clear of what you're stepping into. So, what is that vision? What is that feeling you want to have? What is that end goal?
Mhm.
What are the behaviors to get there?
That's
And then
awesome.
finally, to just put the cap on it, what was the lesson? What have you learned?
From the past as you carry it forward.
Yeah, I think for the sake of this conversation, looking at what was the lesson for the year is a great
Mhm.
way to do it, but you can choose any timeline that you need to.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so I picked your brain. You gave me some free coaching. But fortunately, I think my audience also got some free coaching, so that's really good. But if we wanted to follow up with you and have a conversation with you, what's the best way to do that?
The best way to do that is through my website, kateturnercoaching.com. I always offer a free first session so you can get to know me, what it's like to work with me, and walk away with some value. I also do a lot of writing and connecting on LinkedIn as well. And my handle there is Kate Turner 9. I'd welcome any and all conversation there, and would love to hear feedback of how this landed for everyone that listens too.
It's great. Yeah, I would encourage people to connect with you on LinkedIn because I don't see everything that you post, but I love the way you comment on other people's posts, but and then the insights that you bring in your journey and your story and the work that you're doing. It's always just good stuff. And I would say, reason I say good stuff, it's not like, Yahoo, whoop-de-doos kind of stuff. It's good energy. I just like reading it, and I can feel the positive vibes that come from it, or the insightful vibe that comes from it. So I would encourage people to engage there. If you want to test it out first before you reach out and have a great conversation with Kate, start there.
Thank you.
Thanks for spending time with me today. This is like a treat. I love it when we do these.
You have to keep doing this podcast so I can see you this time next year.
Yeah, well, that's right. You were my first guest on this podcast when we kicked this off last year. It was January 9 was the first podcast last year, and then you were in September. I think we talked about beliefs and stuff like that. But yeah, this is good stuff. You've introduced me some great people, and you've given us some great messages and insights. So I appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate your time and your insights as well.
It's always fun. Okay, for my guests, just remember, please open your heart, open your ears, open your eyes, open your mind, because once you start listening, everything changes. This is Dave Cook signing off. I hope you guys all have a great week and look forward to hearing and seeing you guys next week. Thank you.